Hello and welcome to Stupid Ancient History, Stupid Exam Skills, and today we're looking at the 6-mark briefly outlined questions. So as always, a little disclaimer, these techniques are not the only way to approach this question. These are not set by the exam board saying this is how you must do them. This is simply a collection of little techniques and tricks and hints I found to be quite useful for students answering the exam. If your teacher has a different way of doing these questions, absolutely follow your teacher's advice rather than some weirdo on the internet. And again, as always, let's have a quick look where we find these briefly outlined questions. You find them on the period study section of the exam paper, so the Persia section or Foundations of Rome. And there they are, question 2, right at the top after the 1-mark questions. This is effectively the first question you actually have to write an extended answer to. So let's start by looking at what the question does want you to do and what the question doesn't want you to do. The first thing to point out is this is a relatively simple question. It's only assessing AO1, which is knowledge. You don't have to do anything complicated, you just have to, like the question says, outline, which is a vague version of describe. The key thing you must do though is this has to be written as prose or extended text. You can add all the bullet points in the world to these questions, and they are usually quite broad. If you just bullet point, you will get 0 marks, even if everything you have written is accurate. So it must be written as prose. So broadly, when we're doing these kind of outline questions, the mark schemes, again, being OCR, they follow level systems, but what we're looking for is, realistically, 3 things you could say about what it's asking about with some development or detail. So make a point about what it's asking you, and then give a little bit more detail to show that you know what this is. The assessment objective here is knowledge. Show that you know stuff. Don't be vague. And if you do that 3 times, effectively that should get you the 3 marks. These are not long answers. And in that, there's no need for an introduction, there's no need for judgments, evaluation or anything fancy, simply outlining and describing key features of something. And as always, use the marks as a guide for 1 mark a minute. But for this question, because it's not difficult and you've got much bigger exam questions to answer later on, try and aim for 5 minutes or less. Speed and how quickly you can write definitely is your friend with this exam paper. So let's have a look at an example. This example is from the OCR sample or specimen materials, which is freely available on their website. It also comes with a mark scheme and some sample answers if you want to have a bit more of a route around. So the question simply says, outline the main features of Cyrus's city at Pasargadae. Nice and easy, it tells you what it wants you to describe, and again, main features. So if we look on the screen again, you've got the 3 points with the extra detail. So the first point I would probably point out would be that the main feature of the city or the palace are its gardens. We know it was massively built around gardens. The development to this would be, I'd say this is a highly prized thing to have in such an arid region. You could talk about the origin of the word paradise being paradise of these gardens. This was something to be revered. The second point I've put is that the city or the palace was surrounded by stone walls. Not only does this make it effectively a fortification or a citadel, but this is unusual because we know the majority of buildings built during this period were built from mud bricks, so Pasargadae sets itself aside in that respect. The third point I'd make in outlining the main features is that Pasargadae has 2 palaces, which archaeologists call Palace P and Palace S. The development would simply be that Palace P is Cyrus's private residence, and Palace S was often where he would meet guests. That's where he was doing his official business. So those are the 3 points with development that I came up with just off the top of my head. The good thing about this question though is there's always a little caveat on the mark scheme saying credit any other relevant answers. These three things are not the only things you can say about Pasargadae. You could write about all kinds of different things. We've not talked about its location in the Persian Empire. We've not talked about the fact that it has a Zendan, even though we don't really know what that is. We've not talked about the fact that Cyrus's tomb is there. These are all relevant, but you don't have to include these because it only asks you to outline the main features. So there's plenty of scope for all kinds of different answers with this question. So here we see an example answer. This is from OCR's suggested student responses, again freely available on their website. And you can see how quick and easy these questions can be. This is a short answer, but it does everything it needs to do. There's no waffling going on. It's straight to the point. One of the main features, blah 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 blah. Another feature, blah 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 blah. Final feature, blah 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 blah. It does exactly what it needs to do. It's functional, it gets in, it makes its point, it moves on. And this would have got 6 marks. So you can see this is not a challenging question if you know what you're talking about. The caveat to this is you obviously need to know about the Sea Pasargadae to answer this question. So revise, revise, revise. And let's move on now to an example from the Foundations of Rome paper. Again, this is from the sample material on OCR's website. The question clearly says, outline how Romulus established the foundation of Roman political structures. Now, this is a little harder than the other one because it's quite specific. It's just talking about political structures. So if you start talking about Romulus's foundation of Rome, the wolf thing, Palatine Hill, you would get 0 marks. It's got to be quite specific. But again, it's Romulus, so there's plenty to go out. It's almost like he was fictional in the amount of things he did. So you can see on the plan we've got 3 points again with development. The first point and the obvious point would be he established the Senate. And then the development was, this was 100 wise men or rich men known as the Fathers who were there to help him rule, not Rome. Next point is simply patricians and plebeians, so he apparently establishes these according to Dionysius. And we can say this is the fundamental Roman socio-political structure. This establishes the ruling elite from the ordinary masses, the plebeians. This is apparently down to Romulus, whether it is or not, we don't need to get into that here. But you say he did this, this is how it establishes political structure. The last one I've included is he establishes symbols and features of political power. So the lictors, the bodyguards, he develops the toga or the praetexta and the curial throne, and all of these things are there to show him as the king, and these are things that following kings used as well. If you have time and you want to be really fancy, you could even draw the link between these kind of things and the imperial imagery. But for 6 marks, you don't really have time. So there are three things I came up with off the top of my head. You could have also included lots of others. Again, the caveat exists. So you could have talked about the equestrians or the soleres, how these knights, these cavalrymen became a part of Roman political power. You could talk about his joint rule with the Sabines. It really doesn't matter as long as it's a political feature done by Romulus that you can get a little bit of development from. And again, there's your sample answer. It goes straight away with, when Romulus founded Rome, he chose 100 wealthy men. Fine, no problem. It goes a little bit more into detail about certain aspects, sometimes at the disservice of later points. This answer, according to OCR, would have got 5 out of 6 marks, but you can see it makes clear points. Some are more detailed than others, so the development, the equal development of each of your points, it seems, is really, really quite clear. What it does say is it's not actually linked to Romulus, so again, it's just about your simple phrasing. Rephrase the question. One political development Romulus made was, and move on. So in summary, these briefly outline questions. AO1 only, it's just knowledge, don't do anything fancy. Do it in less than 5 minutes, 4 is good. The quicker you can get your ideas down, the better you're shaving minutes off the exam time. Try and aim for 3 points with some development. If you can do more in that time, happy days, go for it. But there's no need to have an exhaustive list of things that were done. It's an exam, it's a short question, 3 points with a bit of specific development, show your knowledge, move on. So there you go, there's the quick overview to the 6-mark briefly outlined questions. I hope this has been useful and not too tedious. As always, leave us a comment below, and until next time, goodbye.